Naona nyuma yangu tuko katika ukumbi mojawapo katika kitivo cha mafunzo ya sheria. Na tuko hapa kwa sababu kuna kongamano ambalo linahusisha ama ambalo ni la mbinu mbadala za kuweza kuangazia upatikanaji wa haki. Kwa kimombo wanasema alternative justice systems, na ni kongamano ambalo linang'oananga rasmi siku ya leo, na ni kongamano la siku 4 ambalo ni la 3 kuweza kufanyika katika nchi yetu ya Kenya, na kwa mara ya kwanza kabisa likiweza kufanyika na likiweza kuandaliwa katika kaunti ya Nakuru. Tayari mamia ya wajumbe wameweza kufika kutoka katika maeneo mbalimbali kote nchini, na wameweza kufika hapa ili kuweza kuhudhuria kongamano hili. Na mtazamaji, labda unajiuliza, je, tunapozungumzia alternative justice systems tunamaanisha nini? Kuna vile ambavyo kama taifa, labda kama jamii, tumekuwa tukizoea ya kwamba haki inatolewa kwa njia ambayo tunajua ni ya kuelekea pale mahakamani, lakini kumekuwa na juhudi, kumekuwa na mikakati ambayo imeweza kufanywa kuweza kuhakikisha kwamba wananchi wanaweza wakapatiwa mbinu zingine, ama wanaweza wakahamasishwa njia zingine ambazo ni mwafaka za kuweza kuwasaidia vile vile kuweza kuhakikisha kwamba wameweza kupata haki. Na ndio maana kongamano hili linaangaziwa siku ya leo. Baadhi ya wataalamu ambao wako hapa ni wanasheria, vile vile tuko na walimu, tuko na wasemaji katika jamii, tuko na mashirika ya umma, na tuko vile vile na kanisa, tuko hata na wafanyabiashara. Wote wamekuja pamoja ili kuweza kuhakikisha kwamba wameweza kuangazia vile ambavyo kongamano hili litaweza kuwasaidia na vile vile kuweza kusaidia jamii. Ni kongamano ambalo ni la kipekee kwa sababu vile vile litakuwa likihudhuriwa wakati ambapo litakuwa linaendelea na Chief Justice, ama ukipenda jaji mkuu ambaye ni Mheshimiwa Martha Koome, pia atakuwa akihudhuria kongamano hili wakati ambapo litakuwa linaendelea katika siku hizi 4. Kwa hivyo kama vile ambavyo unatazama nyuma yangu, ni kuanza tu ndio inafunguliwa rasmi, inazinduliwa rasmi, na moja kwa moja ninajua kwamba tutakuwa vile vile tunakupeleka ili uweze kuona mambo ambayo yatakuwa yanaangaziwa. Tumefahamishwa kwamba siku ya leo tuko na naibu gavana David Scones, yeye ni naibu gavana katika kaunti ya Nakuru, tayari ameshafika. Vile vile tuko na rais, ama vile vile tuko na mwenyekiti wa mchakato mzima wa masuala haya ya alternative justice systems, ama masuala haya ya mbinu mbadala za kuweza kupata haki, ambaye ni Jaji Profesa Joel Ngugi, ambaye vile vile tayari wameshaingia katika ukumbi huu, na maafisa wengine na wajumbe tu wengine wa ngazi za juu katika nchi yetu ya Kenya, na vile vile katika masuala haya ambao vile vile tayari wamefika ili kuweza kuhakikisha kwamba masuala haya yameangaziwa vizuri, na vile vile watu wameweza kufahamishwa yale ambayo ni ya muhimu na yale ambayo ni ya maana sana kuweza kuangaziwa. Kwa hivyo mtazamaji, moja kwa moja utakuwa vile vile unazidi kutazama, na katika kipindi chetu cha Legal Tuesday kwa siku ya leo, nafikiri haya ndio mambo ambayo tutakuwa tunakuletea hata kwa kina zaidi. Endelea kutazama uweze kufahamu mengi. Mimi ni Mangicho Mola, tukiwa na kikosi kizima.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I take this opportunity to greet you all in Jesus' name. Good morning and praise the Lord. I'm Reverend mountains, let the hills hear what you have to say. Hear, you mountains, the Lord's accusation. Listen, you everlasting foundations of the earth. For the Lord has a case against his people. He is lodging a charge against Israel. My people, what have I done to you? How have I pardoned you? Answer me, for I brought you up out of Egypt and redeemed you from the land of slavery. I sent Moses to lead you, also Aaron and Miriam. My people, remember what Balak, king of Moab, plotted, and what Balaam, son of Beor, answered. Remember your journey from Shittim to Gilgal, that you may know the righteous acts of the Lord. What shall I come before the Lord and bow down before him, the exalted God? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I offer my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly before your God. Prophet Micah asks a crucial question in the midst of injustice and violence during his time. What does the Lord require of his people? What is God expecting of his people? This is also a question that we must ask ourselves today as we are invited to join a pilgrimage of justice and peace in the world. The answer is clear as we read from the scripture. 3 things. Number 1, do justice. Number 2, love kindness. And number 3, walk humbly before your God. The first 2 commands stands at the center of Israel's faith talk concerning the love for a neighbor. Love your neighbor as you love yourself, but more importantly, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and with all your might. But thirdly, is also a requirement that people should always walk humbly before God. So Prophet Micah lived in the land of Judah during a time of great wealth and prosperity. On the outside, it appeared that God's people were thriving, but on the inside, they were rotting in their core, to their core. Why? Because political corruption was there, perversiveness was there, economic exploitation was rampant, and ethical violations were ferocious, just like our time today in the land of Kenya. So we need whistleblowers even today in our land, just as Micah did during his time. And as we welcome you to this conference, we want to encourage each one of us, especially this very important arm of our government, to always act justly before the Lord. Meaning, do what is right and truthful according to God's word by all means. Represent the people as judges, magistrates, lawyers, in your practice in a manner that you try as much as possible to bring about true justice amongst the people. But you need to do that with some loving kindness in your heart, where you integrate your justice policy with relationship, so that you may be able to meet the very needs of the people. But more so, let us be humble. Humble ourselves before the Lord. Let us humble ourselves before other people. Many a times watu naambiwa salamianga watu sababu pesa inafanya nini? Pesa huisha. So when the Lord has elevated you to a position of influence, humility, humility, humility. And as I end, it is my prayer that you will champion the whistleblowing voice of saying no to corruption, saying no to bribery, saying no to discrimination, and serve the nation with love and such a great commitment that God himself, who is the final judge, will say, well done, faithful servant. I want to end by a small story of a grade 5 teacher who asked his pupil to name 5 most corrupt countries in Africa. And one pupil raised his hand and was like, Uganda, Ghana, Nigeria, Congo, and then Sierra Leone. And then the mwalimu asked, why didn't you mention Kenya? And the boy in Kiswahili said, unapo hesabu wenye dhambi, hapana ongeza shetani mwenyewe. To show how much our nation in one way or another is rotten to the core because of such issues. But I want to implore on you this morning that you are the remaining voice of bringing sanity in the Republic of Kenya. And that is my charge for you this morning. God bless you very much. Let us pray. Our God and our Father, we worship and glorify your holy name this morning, thanking you for your love upon our lives. And thank you that in your own grace, you give us opportunities of service, and especially to do your will. And Lord, from this scripture, you had a case against the Israelite community, because this is a nation that you loved, and you did much for them, but they forgot you and destroyed the very core of your mandate of doing justice and loving others, and even expressing aspects of humility in their lives. And Lord, we want to thank you for this team that you have brought to our university. It is my prayer that you may help them even as they continue in their conference, so that, oh Lord, from here, you may raise men and women who will stand for the truth and administer justice for your own glory and honor and for the better of humanity. In the name of God the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Welcome to Kabarak University. Enjoy your time. God bless you.
Good morning. Habari zenyu. Karibuni sana siku hii ya leo ambayo tutatusherekea utamaduni wetu tukiweza kunengenezana kuhusu njia mbadala za kupata haki. Allow me to establish the protocols, and secondly to be able to give us some housekeeping issues so that we are able to be comfortable here at Kabarak. This is the protocol for today. The Deputy Governor, Nakuru County, His Excellency David Kones, the Deputy Chief Justice, Uganda High Court, Honorable Justice Richard Butera, the President of the Court of Appeal of Kenya, Honorable Justice Daniel K. Msinga, Court of Appeal Judge, Honorable Justice Anna Okwengu, the Chair, National Steering Committee on Implementation of Alternative Justice Systems, and the Judge of the Court of Appeal of Kenya, Honorable Justice Professor Joel Ngugi, Judges of the High Court and Equal Status Courts, the National Steering Committee members present, the Honorable Magistrates and Kadhis present, led by the Registrar Magistrates Court, Honorable Caroline Kabucho, members of the Academia, led by Professor John Ambani, who is the Dean of Kabarak University, Professor Yash Palgai, and Professor Jill Cottrell Guy, Chair of the Board, Katiba Institute. Development partners present, esteemed religious leaders, eminent elders, and valuable Ajs practitioners. The students of Kabarak University, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. This is the protocol, and it's our humble prayer that shall be able to adopt the protocol for today. In terms of housekeeping, we have 4 areas where you can be able to relieve ourselves in case you want to use the toilets. Just behind the tent, this hall where we are, we have some toilets there, and this other side, and across. For our VVIPs, we'll be able to take you upstairs where we have the boardroom. And we welcome you to this particular day for our first day of the Ajs Conference. And it's my humble pleasure to be able to invite our MC for today. Let's give a clap to her, Madam Emily Chwea, who is also our Vice Chair for the National Steering Committee. My name is Jemima Aluda. I'm the Head of Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Jemima, for that. Now it is my honor and pleasure to invite the first speaker of this session, the opening session, the Dean of the Kabarak University, Professor John Ambani. Karibu sana, Professor.
Asante, asante. Sijui niseme nini. Nina furaha inayozidi kiwango. Sababu gani? Sababu mmenitembelea na mmenitembelea na roho safi, na mmekuja wote, wale wakubwa zaidi na sisi ambao ni wakubwa kiasi pia tuko, na nafurahi sana kuwaona nyote mkiwa hapa. Karibuni sana Kabarak. Naomba kufuata zile protokali zilizowekwa vile tumeelezwa hapo awali, na naomba nikishafanya hivyo nitaje maneno mawili matatu ambayo sio lazima yafuatane vilivyo, yanaweza kuwa yamechanganyika. La kwanza ni kusema tu karibuni Kabarak, na sio Kabarak yote hivi leo, na wakaribisha kwenye Kabarak Law School, shule ya sheria ya Kabarak. Manake uwezo wangu unafika hapo tu, sivyo? Kuna mwingine atakuja kesho naye ataweza kuwakaribisha kwa shule mzima, yule anaitwa Vice Chancellor. Mimi nawakaribisha kwa mamlaka yangu madogo haya. Yeah. Kabarak Law School, karibuni sana. Nadhani mshaanza kufurahia, na amini tutakuwa na discussion mzuri, tutaweza kuwasiliana, tutaweza kuelewana, na itakapofika Ijumaa sote tutakuwa tumejifunza jambo moja au lingine, tutaenda nyumbani tukiwa na furaha sana. La pili ni kusema kwamba nafurahia sana jambo hili la AJS. Niliposema kwenye mtandao nikisema watu waje Kabarak, nilisema hata jina Alternative Justice System sijalifurahia mimi mwenyewe. Manake alternative halinipendezi ilo jambo, sivyo? Ilo neno. Manake hii si alternative justice. Hii ndiyo justice yenyewe, sivyo? Ama nimekosea? Na nafurahia hili jambo, na nataka nitaje Justice Joel Ngugi ambaye tumekuwa na shiriki naye kwa karibu kwa hili jambo na kupanga huu mkutano. Nilifurahishwa sana wakati alipoanza kufanya hii kazi. Nimekuwa nafuata hii kazi kwa muda, na nimeona kwamba ana hamu ya kubadilisha haya mambo. Na nafurahishwa kwa sababu gani? Nitawaeleza mambo mawili kwa maisha yangu ambayo niliona nikiwa mtoto ama nikiwa mchanga, na nimezidi kuyaona, na nikasema kwamba lazima tukomeshe mambo mengine ambayo hatufai kuwa tunaendelea kuyafanya. Mojawapo ni lile ambalo nitataja hapa. Nikiwa mdogo nilianza kuona kwamba tunaishi maisha ambayo sio ya ukweli. Mtoto kule Kakamega, sivyo? Usiku watu wanaenda kwenye mganga wamejificha, sivyo? Kisiri, Jumapili wanaenda kwenye kanisa wazi. Sikuelewa hayo mambo. La pili, kila wakati ulipompeleka mtu kwenye kotini, mahakama, ulikuwa unachukuliwa vibaya sana na wenzako. Sijui kama mlishuhudia haya ambayo mimi nilishuhudia nikiwa mtoto na nazidi kushuhudia. Tuseme kwamba una jambo, matatizo la shamba nyumbani na ndugu yako. Unapoenda kwenye koti, wenzako kuona vibaya sana. Vibaya zaidi. Na hata mara nyingi watatuma wazee, sivyo? Waseme unamfanyia nini nduguyo. Na mara nyingi hata criminal cases pia unapata kwamba umetuma mtu akuongeleshe yule ambaye unaweza mkamsikiza, akuongeleshe aweze kubadilisha mawazo yako, urudi ukaongea nyumbani. Inaonyesha kwamba watu wetu ni kama Kuna vile pia wanadhani kwamba mambo mengine yanaweza suluhishwa kinyumbani, si lazima tupeleke aibu zetu kule kwingine. Ndiposa nikasema nimefurahia hili jambo la AJS, lakini mimi nitaliita MJS, Multiple Justice Systems, kwa sababu linaturudisha kuwa watu tena, watu ambao wataishi maisha ambayo sio ya kujifanya, sio ya uongo. Hatuna fasad, tuseme wamombo wanavyosema, sivyo? Tuishi maisha ambao sisi ni watu ambao tuko na tunafurahia kuwa kile ambacho tuko, na tunafanya vitu kulingana na vile tunafurahia na ambavyo jamii zetu zinafurahia. So niseme kwamba nimefurahia sana. Mwishowe pia ni kurudi pale nilipoanza, kuwashukuru sana. Umekuja na nimeshukuru. Nimefurahi kuona Chief Justice wetu wa Deputy Chief Justice wetu wa Uganda akija hapa. Nashukuru sana. Deputy Governor wetu tunafanya kazi na yeye hapa, ni wetu. Na Kabarak iko kwenye Nakuru County, tunashukuru sana. Nimefurahia kuona Principal Judge of Court of Appeal na Court of Appeal Judges ambao wako hapa, nashukuru sana. Judge wetu wa hapa Nakuru, Principal Judge Ngudi, tunafanya kazi kila wakati vizuri na yeye. Tunafurahi kwamba anazidi kuja kututembelea na kutujulia hali na kutusaidia wanafunzi wetu wakiwa hapa, anakuja kuwaongelesha, na mara nyingi pia wakiwa kotini anawaeleza vizuri sana. Hizo ripoti tunazidi kupata. Nasema ni asante sana. Wacha nisisahau mwalimu wangu Professor Guy na Professor Jill Guy, ambao ndio waliokuwa kama mfano kwetu tulipokuwa tunasoma sheria, na wengine wetu ikafika mahali tukasema pia tutakuwa constitutional lawyers kama hao. Na ikafika mahali nilifurahia sana nilipopata hiyo fursa ya kuandika kitabu cha kumsifu Professor Guy. Nafurahi sana niliweza kupata hiyo fursa, maana amefanya kazi kubwa sana kwenye nchi hii, na ndio wale ambao walituanzishia katiba yetu. So tuseme karibuni sana nyinyi wote. Nilisema wale wakubwa zaidi na pia wale ambao wako na mimi ambao si wakubwa zaidi but bado ni wa maana. Karibuni sana Kabarak, tujifurahishe, tusikie raha na tuongee AJS. Mungu awabariki sana. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor John Ambani, for those remarks and the warm welcome that you've given us to this beautiful, beautiful university. Now, next on the list is Dr. Steve Akoth. He's also the Vice Chair of the National Steering Committee on AJS. You know, the matters that we are dealing with are very weighty, so they need two vice chairs. That's why we have Professor Dr. Steve Akoth and myself. And he was also the chair, and he is also the chair of the conference committee. Karibu sana, Dr. Akoth. Can you raise your voice? I can't hear you.
Okay, habari za asubuhi. Anasema kuwa hana kalamu. Ni hivyo msema? Haya, hiyo tutashughulikia. Hiyo usiwe na wasiwasi, tutashughulikia. Allow me really to thank you, Your Excellency, the Deputy Governor, and I stand on all the protocols that have been established to invite us to this conference. And my task this morning, as assigned to me by our chair, Justice Professor Joel Ngugi, is to give you the background of how we have arrived here. Allow me to apologize to my friends who know me as a good Kiswahili speaker that I will abandon Kiswahili just for this session, specifically because I would like to convince the Deputy Chief Justice from Uganda to adopt this model. So he is a principal audience, and then as we sort of flower up in that audience. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the third year that we convene together to discuss the question of alternative justice system as a national question. It is important to suggest that we can create a parallel between our convenings and other parallels and other convenings that have happened in other parts of the world. In the 1970s, in the United States, there was a major crisis with the criminal administrative justice system. And so what they did is a couple of scholars came together and convened a series of conversations to get a way out of that crisis. One of the leading scholars at the time who led that conversation was by the name Roscoe Pound. And so those conferences came to be known as the Roscoe Pound conferences. But remember, they were convened in a moment of crisis. 3 years ago, after being flagged off by Justice Martha Koome, our chair, Justice Ngugi, rallied our committee and all of you to start a series of conferences. Our conferences were not initiated at a moment of crisis. Our conferences were initiated at a moment of opportunity. The opportunity lay in the constitution that Kenyans gave to themselves, which provided that alternative justice system, among other frameworks of dispute resolution and access to justice, shall be promoted. So we suggest, therefore, that if the conferences that were discussing a moment of crisis in the 1970s were called the Roscoe Pound conferences, it may be appropriate to call our conferences Martha Koome conferences. So it may be good, therefore, to suggest to you that if you find the name, the National Conference on AJS, too long, just call it the Third Justice Martha Koome Conference, because she is the convener of this series of conferences. But the departure here is important, that these conferences are about expanding the opportunities. And we expand them in 3 ways. First of all, the framing, and that also helps us to go back to the question that Dean has asked. The framing of AJS begins by agreeing that judicial authority resides in the people, just like executive authority resides in the people, just like legislative authority resides in the people. And the people then delegate that authority. But after delegating it, the same constitution provides a hygienic model of relationship. It suggests that although you have delegated, you, the people, you have some residual power. But that residual power cannot be exercised randomly. That residual power is exercised within certain design. And that design is what we see 159 2C and the qualified 159.3 raising, which is let us circulate around the authority that we've designed, which is the judiciary. So it situates judiciary as a default forum at the center and invites all of us to exercise our residual authority as we circulate around it, and obligates the judiciary to promote that which we are doing. And they promote it by respecting it, they promote it by protecting it, and having conversations such as these ones, which are meant to enhance transformation. Because none of those systems are perfect. Our systems as judicial actors are not perfect. Our systems as AJS actors are not perfect. And we're in this project of transformation. And that's why the duty to promote, therefore, is understood as being respect, protect, transform. So while I do agree that in terms of practical framing, the most logical phrase could be multiple justice system, but to avoid confusion and to avoid a return of a hierarchical relationship between judiciary and the other actors because they would like to superintend over them, it's perhaps useful to retain the word, the naming AJS. Having given that background, allow me now to explain the theme of the conference as we have it today. The conference for this year is themed Accelerating People-Centered Justice in Kenya, Engaging, Expanding and Retooling AJS. That is a whole thesis. But let me unbundle it in a few minutes by suggesting that our meaning of the word people-centered is something that should give us a particular attraction. When you talk about people in the context of Europe and the United States, you often see the people as the person envisaged in the post-European Enlightenment movement, where a person was like an atom, the individual. So a person's rights is about me, Ouma, me, Akoth. But when you talk about people in Kenya, in South Africa, in Ghana, in Asia, we are talking about Akoth And then you ask, what is the meaning of the name Akoth? Rainfall. So therefore, you cannot know me without understanding my climatic ecosystem. Because I'm a rainmaker in any case. When you talk about a rainmaker, then the rainmaker has an interest in trees. When you talk about the trees, then you have an interest in forests. You have an interest in ozone. So the idea of people that we discuss in this context refers to we as anthropos and the environment around us. In other words, the things and other organisms with whom we inhabit or cohabit together in the planet. So the idea of people here is not, to use the difficult bad word, anthropocentric framing. It is very loaded with the entire ecosystem thing. And this is important to agree on, because when you come to the global debate on, for example, what is people-centered justice, the way a justice seeker or a justice actor in the Netherlands is likely to argue about what is people-centered justice, in our view, may be significantly different from the way a justice actor in Uganda will argue. Because a justice actor in Uganda, if, for example, he is from the Karamojong, you can't talk about a person from the Karamojong community in Uganda without talking about the livestock. It is not possible to talk about the person without the livestock. So the people include that ecosystem. So in thinking about people-centered justice that we talk about here, it's really about this ecosystem-based thinking. And this is how the Chief Justice in the Stage has framed that concept as well. The second part of our theme is engaging, expanding, and retooling. Let me start with the concept of engaging. Why is engaging important in our framing? It's because AJS is a dialogic, it's dialogue-based justice. It is not justice where somebody comes with a big stick and imposes, as you see in the, the positivist model of thinking, where somebody posits, comes and there's a sovereign who comes and posits. That is not our idea of justice. Ours is dialogic. It's generated in the everyday contestations, everyday arguments, everyday stories, everyday construction of what our world is and what our world ought to look like. So this conference will really be about a series of dialogues. This dialogic component starts here and expands also in the other terrains from where we come. Then there is expanding. We cannot deal, in our view, with the justice gap question unless we expand the role of each and every one of us as both a justice seeker and a justice provider. In other ways, creating a constituency. So moving away from the fictitious notion that exists elsewhere, not in Kenya, that justice is only found in courts. Because we know it is not true. That justice is not only found in courts. We know it is not true that health is only found in hospitals. We know we are going to learn here, but we are not enrolled at Kabarak. So expanding is about geography, but it's also about changing our roles. Changing our roles from seeing justice as that which we go with a big bowl to seek, to see ourselves as potters, molding. We are the clay. We have the clay, so we are potters. We are molding. We are building justice. That is the meaning of expanding. The last component of our theme is retooling. And retooling is quite important. Why is retooling important? Retooling is important because the authority to exercise AJS is one that we have given to ourselves. It was not established by the Constitution. But when we promulgated the Constitution, we agreed that this Constitution must protect it, and the judiciary, which is the default forum for accessing justice, must then promote it. And that therefore means that we have a standard test on what is AJS, what is not AJS. Because all self-help initiatives acceptable as they are in common law, cannot pass as AJS. They can't pass as AJS. So you must have a criteria of constantly measuring and saying, is this it? Is this not? Take, for example, many years ago, when you were having debate on the people taking law into their hands, and there was a trend where people picked the old unfortunate practice that was there during apartheid South Africa of necklacing. Necklacing is where people, especially in the so-called townships, would accost people whom they think were spies. They gave them a name, Impimpi, and then they would put a necklace, which was a tire, on their necks, and then set them on fire. That trend found its way in Kenya, especially in the 1990s. And some people started calling that mob justice. But it is clear you cannot have the word justice adjacent to that practice which is criminal, which is dehumanizing, which should be abhorred. You can't call it mob justice. It can't be mob justice. So equally, if my brothers and neighbors in Bungoma decide to punish somebody who has stolen a Sanyo radio by saying that he will be crucified, we can't call that AJS. It falls flat. So not every self-help, therefore, can be AJS. So therefore, we must have a test. And what is a test? I want to introduce two words which you can use as a test. And that is something that I want to invite you to consider doing throughout the conference. Whatever practice that people may call or you call AJS, look at it vis-a-vis the Constitution, values, Article 10, Bill of Rights. Now, consider the Constitution as a mirror. And there are two possible images. Those of us who did physics during those days. There is what we call reflection and refraction. Reflection is where the image that you see is a tidy image that you think represents the true capture of what is. If it is me, I look at myself in the mirror. If I see myself with dreadlocks, then there's a problem, isn't it? Because I'm surely starved of them. Or if I see that my face has turned upside down, then there's a problem. So when the face is turned upside down, or let me use the other dreadlocks thing, then that is called refraction. It is distorted. It's not the real image. But if I see myself tidily with what I think I am, that is reflection. So look at your culture, which we are so proud to practice. And culture here is not just about Luo culture or Kalenjin culture. It's also about the Matatu culture. It's also about the market culture. If the image that you get when you look at that culture of yours vis-a-vis the Constitution is distorted, that is not AJS. If the image that you get is distorted, that can't be AJS. If the image that you get represents the actual picture of what you think is a perfect self, then that is AJS. And that is the beginning of retooling. So the retooling here is to invite all of us to align, to embrace the framework of transformation as the most immediate invitation if AJS promotion is to go forward, to ensure that that which is mob violence can't be called mob justice, and therefore that which denies freedom, that which cannot be admissible in an open, democratic society, that which does not advance human rights, cannot be called AJS. So we cannot say that every self-help is AJS. There is a standard measure, and the Constitution invites us to use it as the mirror. Finally, just to give the last grounding around the theme, is so with all that backgrounder and with that invitation for reflection and to avoid refraction, so what do we expect of you in the next 3 days? The first thing that we expect of you, and I'm going to come back later as we unbundle the first substantive session, is to create new networks. And these networks are not hierarchical. AJS and our Constitution is anti-hierarchy. We have to establish protocols, we've done, which is a matter of our order, but in our everyday interaction, let's move beyond the hierarchies. Let's create more frameworks of interaction. The second thing that we expect of you, and we invite you to be, is to move from being a bystander, a justice seeker, and a justice provider on the other side, and form a constituency. We are forming a constituency of justice seekers, justice providers. And finally, and we are so happy today for the last 3 conferences, is the first one where we have Professor Yash Palgai. If the one significant moment that we've had in our country was the constitutional moment, which we embraced, and with it we gave ourselves this constitution, then the moment that is ahead of us now is the moment of confronting the justice gap and turn that justice gap question into a justice moment where all of us, as the Honorable Chief Justice Martha Koome says, will mobilize our tools, will mobilize our energies, and be part of the justice seeking and the justice provision constituency, and turn our country into one where justice flows in abundance, and turn our moment one where justice gap is narrowed as much as possible. I hope that gives you a good background to our conference, and I wish you all a good time here in Nakuru. Enjoy, and please remember to engage, retool, and expand AJS. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Akoth. You have well elaborated the theme of the conference. You've unpackaged it and really set the context for our work this week. I think it deserves a bigger clap than that. Yeah. So as we move on, I'll take this opportunity to invite Honorable Justice Edwin Oguti. He is the presiding judge, Nakuru High Court. Welcome, Judge.
Good morning, everyone. How are you? Bwana asifiwe. I would like to write on the protocols that have already been mentioned, and I just want to take this opportunity to welcome each one of you to Nakuru. You feel welcomed? Yeah, as you've been told, my names are Hedwig Ongudi, and I'm the presiding judge, Nakuru High Court. I'm so happy to see each one of you, and even my own colleagues. I didn't expect such large numbers, and I'm happy that you are all here. As you've been told by Dr. Okoth about, is it Okoth or Akoth? Akoth, sorry. Dr. Akoth, about the theme and what AJS entails. My prayer this morning is that we are all going to engage in our various capacities and do not feel shy to share the ideas that you have. And then at the end of the day, you know, we have a number of judges and magistrates in this place. I would like, at the end of the day, that you convince each one of them to apply AJS in their sessions in court. I've been in Nakuru for less than a year, and the experience I have had with AJS is that AJS would even assist us as the judiciary to deal with backlog in our courts. And some of the people who appear before us may not even know that there is that opportunity for them to sit down as families, as neighbors, and discuss some of the issues that actually bring them to court. So this is a very good opportunity for us to practice AJS, and I'm so happy that in Nakuru, even the church has embraced AJS. Sawa sawa. So let's take that along with us, so that when we leave this place, we don't just keep whatever it is that we'll have discussed here, but we are going to share it out there in our families, even with the chiefs, assistant chiefs, so that this message goes out there. Let us not beat each other as neighbors. We can solve some of these issues, in fact, most of them, through dialogue and even just agreeing as members of society, as family members. Sometimes it's so painful when in court you have family members, not even distant family members, but parents, brothers and sisters who are not even able to see each other because of what? Some little property that their father or their mother left behind. It's painful even for us as we sit there. But when we embrace AJS, I can assure you, some of these issues can be solved without having grudges with each other, but living together as family members. So once again, welcome to Nakuru, and I hope we'll not be sitting up to 6. So that, some of the members here, or some of the attendants have not been to Nakuru. They would want to see one or two of the places in this place, and they also, in the process, they are also sharing what will have been taught here. Ama sivyo, you want to sit up to 9 p.m. So even that, just walking around, is part of AJS, because we discuss things that hinder us from progressing as Kenyans. So with those few remarks, I would like to say welcome and welcome again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judge. We really thank the Judge for those words of welcome, words of encouragement to ensure that we share the training and the skills we gain from here with other stakeholders out there. Next on the list, I see we have Honorable Justice Professor Joel Gugi, is the Judge of Appeal and Chair of the National Steering Committee on AJS. Karibu sana, Judge.
Your Excellency, Deputy Governor of Nakuru, Honorable David Kones, Your Lordship, the Deputy Chief Justice of Uganda, Richard Butera, ndugu na dada zangu, wafanya harakati za haki wenzangu, hamjambo. Ni furaha. Today I am the Kiswahili wing of the committee. We have switched places. So Dr. Akoth talked a lot of English, and I am going to speak in Kiswahili. So my apologies, Your Lordship. At critical junctures, I will translate for you. Lakini kabla sijaongea zaidi, unajua yule chaplain alikuja hapa akasema tuwe tunasalimia watu kwa sababu pesa huisha. Sasa hiyo imeniguza mahali. Sasa nikaona wacha nianzie leo tu na kualika mzee mwenzangu. Hapa kati yetu tuko na national chair wa the National Council of Elders. He is here with us. He also happens to be the chair of the IGAD, Eminent Persons team. So that is a very important elder we have with us, and I thought nitamuita tu hapa asalimu hii hafla na awaite tu awajulishe the other members of the National Council of Elders who have joined us, wasimame at least muone. So please, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Major John Sei as he comes to greet the
Thank you. Riding on the protocols already established, may I take this opportunity kusema hamujambo wananchi. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. Kwa jina, si majina, jina ni John Sei. I come from Elgeyo Marakwet County. I reside in Uasin Gishu. I come from a clan with a totem, a people that practices AJS using the very traditional system. Today here, I'm so honored and really humbled to be invited just to make one or two remarks. As you said, I've just been elected as the new chair and the founding chair of the new committee of eminent persons that has been formed within the IGAD structure. It's an honor for Kenya to have that chair. Kwa hivyo niseme hivi, nashukuru Mungu, niko na wazee wenzangu, nikiwa chairman of the National Council of Elders, niko na wazee wa National Council of Elders. May I kindly ask you to stand wherever you are to be recognized, na mpatie mkono hawa wazee wenzangu. Niko na wazee hasa wale ambao ninawajua, niko na mzee Ben Kanyenji, niko na ole Rie, niko na Silas Olala, niko na Mumbi, niko na Helen from Helen Alake from Marsabit, niko na my sister, hata sijajua jina ni, lakini nimeandika mahali fulani from kule Ukambani kono juu, na niko na mzee mwenzangu, lakini si mzee, ni mzee kijana kutoka Kiambu ako pale, na wengine ambao wako karibu hapa. Tumekuja na mama kule nyuma, tumekuja through idea law. So mimi ni kusema kama mzee, na I think other than Yashwal guy, nilimwona yeye yuko hapa. Asante sana mzee, good to see you. Harakati zile za zamani tulikuwa pamoja kule. So other than him, I think I'm the second oldest in this gathering here. So nimekula chumvi kiazi, na naomba ya kwamba hii, ketini chini wenzangu, asanteni. Pamoja, oh by the way, niko na Ahmed Said pale ambaye ni treasurer wa National Council of Elders. Asante sana. Nataka kusema hivi, jameni, this is the way to go. This is the way to go. And not even alternative. It is the indigenous. It is the very character who we are. We hold the values. We hold the DNA of this AJS. So natumai ya kwamba katika hii conference, we've had it before. Nilikuwa nikimwambia kubwa wetu hapa, Professor Nguki, kwamba it is the time for the troops to marry together. So that right from the coast all the way to the border with Uganda and beyond. Sijajua ni nani mgeni wetu kutoka Uganda. Niwe, asante sana, asante ndugu, asante Justice. Nashukuru. So it will go beyond the boundary. And nataka kuhakikishia kwamba IGAD, with all the 8 African countries, being pastoral, now being agricultural, we have the same values. And I am going to introduce this system within the IGAD fraternity. And I want to say thank you very much indeed for those remarks. Asanteni sana.
Asante sana mzee Major John Sei. Sasa nina hakika hata wakati nitaacha kuwa judge, nikipita Uasin Gishu nitakuwa na mahali pa kulala. Ndugu na dada zangu, ni furaha kubwa sana kuona nyinyi nyote hapa katika hafla hii ya 3 ya kitaifa ya njia mbadala za kuleta haki humu nchini. Wazee mpo? Akina mama mpo? Na vijana wako? Nimefurahi. Nilitaka kuwakumbusha kwamba tulipokutana katika hafla ya mwaka uliopita, tuliahidiana kuwa huo ulikuwa mwanzo mpya wa vuguvugu la mageuzi ya kijamii hapa Kenya kwa kutumia mbinu ya AJS. Mnakumbuka? You will recall when we met last year, we agreed that we were going to constitute ourselves into the AJS movement. Do you recall? Do you remember? Kisha tuliahidiana kuwa tutaleta ripoti ya juhudi tulizofanya kufanikisha malengo ya vuguvugu hili. Je, mmeleta ripoti zenu? Mimi kama mwenyekiti wa kamati imarishi la AJS na mwenyekiti wa vuguvugu hili, I have made myself the general of the movement. Niko na ripoti yangu. Natumaini kila mmoja wenu ako na ripoti yake, kwa sababu hii hafla hii ni kuzungumzia ripoti ambazo mmelete ya kufanikisha hili vuguvugu. Lakini tuulizane swali. Je, mbona tuhitaji vuguvugu la AJS? Na je, mbona tuwe na dharura ya kuifanya sasa? Why do we need an AJS movement? And why is it urgent, as MBCI has said to us? Kwanza, ni sharti tukumbuke kila siku kuwa katiba yetu katika kifungu cha 159(2)(c) iliidhinisha njia mbadala za utatuzi wa mizozo kama njia halali ya kupata haki na ya kuboresha katika mfumo wa haki nchini Kenya. Kisha katiba ikaiagiza idara ya mahakama ikuze njia hizi mbadala za utatuzi wa mizozo na kutafuta haki. Pili, sote tunaelewa kuwa Wakenya walio wengi hutumia mifumo mbadala kupata haki. Hivyo AJS inadumisha upatikanaji haki kwa Wakenya wengi. AJS is the only means of access to justice to most Kenyans. Tatu, mfumo wa AJS ndio mfumo ambao utasaidia upatikanaji haki wa Wakenya ambao hadi sasa hawana njia ya kupata haki. Tulipofanya utafiti hapa nchini, tuliuliza Wakenya, je, wao hufanya nini wanapokabiliana na mgogoro au mzozo na mtu mwingine? We ask Kenyans, what do they do when they have a grievance with someone else, when they have a legal problem? 19% ya Wakenya walisema hawachukui hatua yoyote. 19% of Kenyans said they take no action even when they have a grievance. Wao wanatulia tuli kama maji ya mtungi. Hao ndio Wakenya ambao hawana haki. Hili ndilo tunaita pengo la haki nchini Kenya. This is what we call the justice gap in Kenya. The 19% of Kenyans who, when they have a grievance, do nothing. They choose to do nothing. Okay? Sometimes we call them the Romans 12 people or the Deuteronomy 32-35 people. Those who say the vengeance is the Lord's. Kisasi ni cha sitafanya kitu. Mungu hali ugali mbichi, nitaketi tu. Tunasema hilo ni pengo la haki na ni sharti tulitoe. 17% tu ya Wakenya ndio walisema wao huenda kotini ama kwa tribunal. 64% ya Wakenya 64% walisema wao huenda kwa njia mbadala za utatuzi wa migogoro. 64% of Kenyans said they go to AJS as their first port of call. Takwimu hizi zatuambia nini? What do these statistics tell us? Kwanza, kwamba kuna Wakenya wengi ambao hawana popote wanapoweza kupata haki. Pili, kwamba ikiwa tutatafuta mfumo wa haki wa Wakenya hawa wasio na haki, itabidi tutafute kwingine licha si mahakamani watakapopata haki, kwani kuna mlundiko mkubwa wa kesi mahakamani. We are going to solve the justice gap. It cannot be by channeling the 19% who have no justice to the courts, because we are already suffering with backlog and case delays in court. Basi, inadhihirika wazi kuwa mfumo wa AJS ndio utakaotatua pengo hili la haki nchini. Tukirejelea faida za AJS na ni kwa nini tuifanye harakati za AJS kwa dharura. 4, tufahamu kuwa lengo la jumla la AJS ni kuhifadhi amani, uwiano na maelewano katika jamii. Hivyo, AJS ni mbinu ya kutenda haki kwa tofauti na mara nyingi kwa ufanisi zaidi. Ufanisi unaolete amani katika jamii. Ufanisi unaolete uwiano katika jamii. Ufanisi unaondoa uhasama na chuki katika jamii. Ufanisi unaoleta maelewano na kuondoa kidonda cha chuki na kero kwa wawili au watatu walio na mgogoro. Inapofikia hapa, inabidi niwakumbushe kuwa pale mahakamani huwa hatutatui ugomvi wala migogoro. Unajua saa zingine huwa tunasema tumeenda mahakamani kutatua ugomvi, lakini nataka niwakumbushe mahakamani huwa hatutatui ugomvi wala migogoro. Pale mahakamani huwa tunaamua kesi. Tunasema wewe umeshinda, wewe hiyo ni kuamua, si kutatua. Tunaelewa tofauti? Hatuna utatuzi mahakamani. Mahakamani tuna azimio, tunaamua, tuna uamuzi. Kwa AJS, kwa wazee, wao huleta utatuzi wa migogoro halisi, hata migogoro zilizo sugu. Tunaelewana? Kwa hivyo 5, ningependa kusema AJS inasaidia pia kupanua haki za kibinadamu na uhuru wa kibinadamu. Basi, itabidi tuseme hivi kwa kinagaubaga leo. Elimu yetu ya ukoloni imetufuza kwamba mila, desturi na itikadi zetu zote zinakaidi haki za kibinadamu. We've received colonial education that has taught us that our ways, including our AJS, are definitionally antithetical to human rights, and that's what we are rejecting in the AJS movement. Leo twasema kwamba kuna mila, desturi na itikadi zetu nyingi ambazo zinadhamini haki za kibinadamu, na hizo ndizo tunasema tutazikuza. Tena 6, twasema AJS haina gharama ya juu na pia hutatua migogoro kwa haraka zaidi. 7, AJS haina kizungu mingi kama kile cha Dr. Akoth. Yani haina ufundi, taratibu nyingi ama urasimu ulio sugu. Najua urasimu ulio sugu, ile tunaita technicality, root canal technicality. The AJS does not have technicalities. It's just substantive questions of justice. 8, AJS inapunguza mlundikano wa kesi na msongamano wa mahakamani. Kwa hivyo twasema AJS ndio tiba ya limbikizo. Leo nataka niwafunze majaji na mahakimu neno lipya la Kiswahili. Limbikizo. Limbikizo ndio backlog. AJS ndio tiba la nini? Limbikizo. Kwa hivyo kama mjajifunza kitu kwa hii hafla, mjifunze hiyo. Ukirudi kwenu unasema AJS ndio tiba ya limbikizo. Kwa hivyo wacha tutimize AJS. 9, AJS ndio mfumo wa haki unaomhusisha mwananchi wa kawaida. 10, tamalizia tu kwa 10 lakini naongeza kuendelea. AJS inalenga kuimarisha jukumu la serikali na raia kama wahusika wa moja kwa moja wanaotoa michango kuelekea uhuru wao wa kiraia. AJS is a space which we can now use to reconstitute the state and the citizen, co-constituting a different relationship, which is what part of what Constitution of Kenya 2010 requires of us as Project Kenya. Licha ya faida zote hizi ambazo tu nimetaja kadhaa, bado watu wengi wamezidi kuiona AJS kama njia limbukeni ama duni ama iliyokosa ustaarabu ama iliyo nyuma na isiyofaa kama mfumo wa haki hapa nchini. Despite all these benefits, there are a lot of us who still see AJS as either an inferior way of getting justice or a way of getting justice that is not modern, that is not civilized, and so forth. Je, ni kwa nini AJS imepewa sifa mbaya licha ya manufaa yote haya? Na ni vipi tunavyoweza kubadilisha historia na masimulizi haya ya kinzani kuhusu AJS? Ni vipi tunavyoweza kuifufua AJS kutoka karibu la sahau ambapo mkoloni angependa AJS ielekee? How do we rescue AJS from the colonial narrative? Ndugu na dada zangu, hii ndio sababu tunahitaji vuguvugu la AJS. This is why we need the AJS movement. Katika vuguvugu hili la AJS na katika hafla hii ambayo tunafanya wiki hii hapa Kabarak, kwanza tutaelimishana ukweli wa AJS. Pili, tutazidishiana ujuzi wa AJS. 3, tutatukuza falsafa ya kujikimu kwa njia ya AJS. 4, tutaelezana na kuzingatia maadili ya AJS. Nayo maadili ya AJS ni yale ambayo Dr. Akoth ametueleza kwa Kiingereza, yaliyonukuliwa katika Article 10, kipengele cha 10 cha katiba ya Kenya, yakiwemo, these are the values which must be form the outer boundaries of AJS: uzalendo, patriotism; usawa, equality; maslahi ya haki, equity; ujumuishaji, inclusiveness; haki za kibinadamu, human rights; kujitolea, commitment; uwajibikaji, accountability, na mengine. Hayo ndio maadili ya AJS ambayo hata wiki hii tutakumbushana, tutaelezana. 5, tutatiana moyo tunapofifia mambo ya AJS. Sababu wakati mwingine unaona masimulizi ya kinzani yanayobisha AJS yanakuwa ni mazito sana. Kwa hivyo tutapeana moyo. Ya 6, kwa pamoja tutailinda AJS na kuiepusha kudunishwa na maadui wa AJS. 7, tutaitukuza AJS kuambatana na katiba na sheria za haki za kibinadamu. 8, tutageuza taratibu za AJS na kuziimarisha ili ziendane na haki za kibinadamu, ili kuboresha ulinzi dhidi ya ukiukaji wa haki za kibinadamu na kuambatana na katiba ya Kenya. Hatimaye tutajadiliana changamoto za AJS na kuanza kutafuta suluhisho. Part of what we will do in this conference is to discuss the challenges that we're facing in the implementation of the AJS policy and start thinking or imagining what could be possible solutions to those challenges. Ndugu na dada zangu, tutakapofaulu katika malengo ya vuguvugu hili la AJS, tutakuwa tumefaulu kuigeuza Kenya, ili Kenya iwe nchi ya amani, kwani amani ya kudumu huja kwa njia ya haki pekee. Ili Kenya iwe nchi ya ustawi na ganima, kwani haki ndiyo nguzo ya ustawi, maendeleo na ganima. Ndugu na dada zangu, vuguvugu la AJS ndilo vuguvugu la haki, vuguvugu la upatanisho, vuguvugu la suluhu. Na haki, upatanisho na suluhu ndiyo misheni kubwa zaidi hapa duniani kwenu nyinyi wa Kristo. Ona tuna wa Kristo hapa. Your greatest mission is a ministry of reconciliation and justice. I think we were told this morning as Christians. Kwenu Waislamu, haki, upatanisho na suluhu ndio ibada kubwa zaidi hapa ulimwenguni. Kitabu kitukufu cha Qurani kinatuambia hivyo. Na kwa wale wanaharakati, activists and human rights defenders, haki, upatanisho na suluhu ndio wito wa kipekee zaidi kwenu nyinyi kama wahamasishaji watendaji. Baada ya kusema yote hivyo, basi niulize. Anaona nitauliza kama Mtume Paulo alivyouliza kwenye risala lake kwa Warumi. Ikiwa AJS imehalalishwa na katiba, na imehalalishwa na Mwenyezi Mungu mwenyewe, na imehalalishwa na sera za kibinadamu, za haki za kibinadamu, je, ni nani atakayetutenganisha na AJS? Na ni nani atakayetushawishi tusifanye kazi ya AJS? Ni nani atakayetufanya tufe moyo katika harakati za AJS? Basi nyinyi mwenyewe mmesema hakuna. Hakuna tutakayemruhusu atushawishi tudhalalishe maadili ya AJS. We will not permit anybody to treat AJS as an inferior form of justice. Hakuna atakayetushawishi tudhoofishe kujitolea kwetu kwa AJS, kwani tuna hakika kuwa AJS ni mfumo wa haki utakaoleta mabadiliko na mageuzi ambayo tunahitaji zaidi hapa Kenya. Tunakubaliana hivyo, si ndivyo? Ndiposa ndugu na dada zangu, nina furaha kubwa sana, furaha isiyo na kifani, nyinyi kuwepo hapa kwenye hafla hii ya 3 ya AJS. Nimehemeshwa sana na kuwepo kwenu. I'm inspired by your presence here today. Ningependa kuchukua fursa hii ili kuwakaribisha nyote kwenye hafla hii kwa niaba ya kamati ya AJS ambayo mimi ni mwenyekiti. Ningeomba radhi tafadhali niwajulishe tu wanakamati wote wa AJS ambao wametia bidii sana ili kufanikisha hafla hii, kwani ndio wanaoendesha taratibu zote za vuguvugu hili la AJS, na pamoja tumeweza kuendeleza shughuli hii kwa njia ya kipekee. Naomba tafadhali tuwapigie makofi na kuwashukuru wanachama wenzangu ambao nitawataja, nikianza na naibu wenyekiti wangu Dr. Akoth, also known as Kizungu Nyingi. Naibu mwenyekiti mwingine ni Emily Chwewa ambaye yuko hapa. Majaji wenzangu Daktari Sergon yuko hapa. Justice Masharia Florence yuko hapa. Justice Gekonyo, Justice Ochieng hayuko, ametuma radhi kwenye hafla ya ELC Court, na Justice Ann Mwaure ambaye pia ametuma apologies. Pia tuna mahakimu wenzangu Joan Irura, na msajili wa mahakama kuu Mheshimiwa Clara Otieno Omondi ambaye ametuma apologies. Tena tuna wasomi Dr. Masha Baraza, yuko pale, na Walter Kobe wa ofisi ya OCJ ambaye ametuma apologies. Tuna mzee wa baraza kuu la kitaifa la wazee, mzee Ahmed Set kwa hapa. Kwenye kamiti yangu pia nina vice chair wa National Land Commission Gertrude Ngoko na commissioner wa NCIC Eunice Nyotu ambao hawajaweza kufika siku ya leo. Pia nina mawakili kwenye kamiti hiyo, Morris Kimuli ambaye sijui kama amefika, nafikiri yako njiani, amechelewa kidogo, na pia nina David Njoroge ambaye pia ni wakili ambaye pia nafikiri hajafika kwa sasa. Tuna wanawasilisha civil society, Janet Anyango wa FIDA Kenya, Julie Wayoa Madheka hajaweza kufika, anawakilisha ICJ Kenya, na Tim Wishigi ambaye pia hajaweza kufika, anawakilisha LRF. Tuna Boniface Muindi wa Probation Department, Cyrus Maweo anawakilisha Kenya National Human Rights Commission kwa hapa. Tukirejelea wasomi, tuna Professor Winnie Kamau ambao ni Dean wa University of Nairobi School of Law ambaye ametuma apologies pia, na mwishowe tuna akiwakilisha idara ya polisi, tuna AIG Margaret Karanja. Asanteni sana. Kwa sasa nachukua fursa hii ya kipekee kumkaribisha mgeni wetu wa kipekee leo ili kutukaribisha Nakuru rasmi na kutuidhinisha kuanzia hafla yetu ya leo. Tafadhali mjiunge nami tukimkaribisha naibu wa gavana wa Nakuru, David Kones. Karibu sana Your Excellency.
I was asking him to teach me about that Kiswahili word. So allow me to adopt the protocol that has been already established, because if I mention, I may get lost on the way. So allow me the simplest. I think that is for the lazy people. They say adopt the protocols already established. And now, first and foremost, I want to bring greetings from our governor, Her Excellency Susan Gihiga, who really sent to me in the morning so that we can be together today in this very noble and very important conference. I'm impressed. The way I've been listening, various speakers, I thank God that this opportunity was given to me, so that I've learned a lot. I thought the courts do not recognize the AHIS, which was actually rooted from our societies. That was the way to go, and it was actually bringing peace and harmony in our societies. And this is now, we are now going back to where we belong to. And I really embrace it, and I really congratulate the people, the brainchild of this thing. Pongezi sana. Pongezi sana. This, what is actually, it was long overdue. And it is now, it is there. We really thank God for that. Again, I don't want to read my speech before welcoming you officially to Nakuru County, a county of unlimited opportunities. Please, you are welcome. Everybody feel more welcome. Even our brothers from Uganda, please feel more welcome. You are at home. Now Nakuru County, we have got so many attractions. We have got Lake Nakuru, where we have got the flamingos. I echo what our presiding judge, Nakuru High Court, was saying. Don't spend more time sitting. Get time to go outside so that you can also learn to mow. So we have Lake Nakuru, you can see a lot of flamingos. Menengai, where you can see fantastic scenery. You can also move around and look at Nakuru. It is so attractive. So please welcome to Nakuru so that you can see, you can learn more. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as I've already said, Nakuru County government recognizes that the judiciary is one of the three arms of government established under the Constitution. Article 159 of the Constitution of Kenya bestowed on the judiciary the critical mandate as the custodian of justice in Kenya to pursue alternative justice systems. We appreciate that as an arm of the government, the judiciary takes cognizance of the need to foster collaboration and partnership with the stakeholders in the administration of justice and recognizes county government as a key stakeholder in the administration of justice. The judiciary, therefore, engages stakeholders in areas of mutual interest in the administration of justice. Indeed, the county government is ready to partner and work with the judiciary for timely and just administration of justice in Nakuru. Under the Children Act, county government have been mandated to address issues of children's rights, protection, and welfare, including the provision of safe homes. Nakuru County is willing to address issues concerning the rights, protection, and welfare in partnership with the judiciary. The construction and equipping of Njoro Homecraft, home meant to protect and provide children with hope for the future, is ongoing. Nakuru County government acknowledges that sovereign power under the Constitution is delegated to state organs, among them the judiciary and independent tribunals. Article 1(3)(b). Nakuru County appreciates that Article 159 of the Constitution encourages the use of alternative disputes resolution, including reconciliation, mediation, arbitration, and traditional disputes resolution mechanisms. Nakuru County is supportive of the alternative justice system, is less costly and saves on judicial time. Indeed, it is an effective way of resolving disputes. Nakuru County is an active participant in the alternative justice system, especially regarding land ownership cases. We are actively represented in the working committee, and we have previously had 2 interns assisting the HIS. However, the program came to an end, and we are now exploring ways of getting 2 law graduates to serve the HIS. Further, we are also active participants on code users committee through the office of the county attorney. The government of Her Excellency Susan Kihiga has promised to secure parcels of land in our sub-counties on which the judiciary will construct courts to serve our people close to their homes. We have since written to the Ministry of Lands regarding the setting aside land for construction of law courts premises in Olengurguani and Solai. Indeed, we are committed to securing suitable land for the construction of court premises in Olengurguani and Solai. In conclusion, I want to give you our commitment that Nakuru County will readily collaborate and partner with the judiciary in ensuring timely and fair delivery justice in the county. I want to thank you once again for this valued visit. Thank you very much. I want to be singing Professor wherever I'm going. Ulisema kufupisha limbikizo. Limbikizo.
Thank you so much, Honorable Deputy Governor, for that very encouraging speech, and particularly your commitment to support and work closely with the judiciary to promote AJS in Nakuru County. I think it deserves the 3-step clap. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much. Yes, we now move to the final segment of the opening session, and this is the presentation of the keynote address. It allows me now then to invite Professor Jill Cottrell-Guy to make that presentation. Professor is the chair of the board, Katiba Institute, and I must say she has worked very, very closely with the Office of the Attorney General in the formulation of the public participation policy. Welcome, Professor Jill.
Organize myself. Good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. I am awful at protocols. So I will say all protocols sincerely observed. But as I think the Deputy Governor said, it was rather a long list, and it would take up half the time, and I don't want to talk for too long. But I do want to say, however, to give you very warm greetings from Katiba Institute. It's a great pleasure for us to be involved in this project, and indeed, it's the reason I'm standing here. Because and I'm going to go fairly fast to the substance of what I have to say, is that we had a project. We have not quite finished. We shall be producing a report fairly soon. It's taken us, as so many things do, longer than we had anticipated. It was funded and initiated by the Canadian IDRC, and we worked together with the University of Nairobi School of Law and Institute for Development Studies. So the law side of it and the empirical research side of it from the IDS. So it was, you could say, a multi-disciplinary project. And the question really coming from IDRC was, what do people in Kenya actually do when they have a dispute? What are the costs and the benefits to them? In other words, how do they emerge at the end of the process? Has it been a good process for them? Was it worthwhile, and so on? Also, what about the expense from the people delivering the service? And the final question, which of course is in a sense at the core, does this lead to some conclusions about what types of activity would be useful to scale up and to have on a broader, maybe some of these things are very locally initiated. Is something similar, could it be done on a national basis? In a sense, what we have here is an amazing representation of people involved in AJS from various parts of the country and of different types, I think. So but those were the underlying objectives. So the core of the project was an empirical study of talking to people and talking to organizations that supply alternative justice and I tried to do a PowerPoint, but there isn't a facility. But I headed my presentation, Alternative with Inverted Commas, because it does suggest that the courts are the norm and something else is an alternative. But one of the things, of course, that has come clear here already this morning, and certainly came from our project, is that actually it's the other way around. That the norm for most people is actually not going to court. And one has to be honest, it's probably the case in other countries as well. Actually, the court systems couldn't function if all the disputes were taken to them. Most people, most of the time, in most countries, in most cultures, deal with their disputes not going through a formal court system. And just as we had a number of quotations, the methodology we used mainly was a sort of combination of a structured and in-depth interview. In other words, we had set questions, but people were free, and we would, our student researchers would record or take down note what people said. On the other hand, they were promised anonymity, so we don't have the identity of any people that we spoke to. I also have to add that the interviews took place sort of in the middle of COVID-19 epidemic. And it was a great sacrifice, I think, on the part of the student researchers. There were 34 of them supplied by all three institutions to go out around the country to places that were, in some cases, quite strange to them, to find out, and then we would have local informants to help them understand language and issues and so on. And our supervision was less hands-on than it might have been. And there were various other problems, probably including not having as many respondents as we would have wished. And just to say that, I'd like to read you a quotation. This is about somebody's reaction to the idea of going to court. This is the best way to resolve such cases. This is alternative. As there is no justice in court, and no one would have come out as a witness. And of course, it's often a problem. And such cases need witnesses. I think this was a homicide case of some sort, which is interesting. If we went to court, it would take time for witnesses to leave their work and go and be a witness in the case, which most people would not agree to. Also, we would not have received justice. It also makes us have peace, and both communities can go back to speaking terms. We are now friends, and they even attended the burial and took part in the funeral ceremony. If we would not have intervened in this case, we would have, this is comes from the chair of the AJS institution. If we would not have intervened in this case, you would have heard the media reporting ethnic clashes. The young men from the community had armed themselves and were ready to go avenge his death without thinking about the consequences. That is probably an extreme example, but it's very interesting. And this is another problem about courts. It's a challenge for the judicial officers when people come late to court. And when it's raining, they will not attend because the roads are impassable. They start their journeys to court at 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. since they live very far from the institution. This then delays the hearing of cases. If the case doesn't take off on that day, it is very difficult to get them to commit, since where they come from is very far. I'm sure that these little scenarios are probably familiar to many people in the room. I want to go we carried out research in 9 counties, very different in various ways. Bungoma, Garissa, Kiambu, Kilifi, Meru, Migori, Nairobi, Nakuru, and Turkana. So we got a very, although so many that we probably couldn't do very detailed analysis county by county, but we certainly got different experiences. People told us about the problems they have in seeking justice, particularly emphasizing the courts. The biggest one single item they mentioned, I think is important, a lack of information about what to do. And then lack of poverty, corruption in institutions, lack of inability to get to courts, as we're saying, lack of a justice institution anywhere near, cultural barriers, and so on. But what type of dispute they had? Now, this is nothing unusual. It squares with other similar studies. The one that was done not long before we did this was done by the Hague Institute for Initiatives in Law, and the picture they painted was very similar. The type of dispute, land was the largest, followed by disputes between one's spouse or partner, things like physical violence, desertion, financial support, children issues, some commercial, then getting down to the smaller numbers, employment, assault, theft, sexual assault, police brutality, a community dispute, disagreement with public bodies like refusal to admit a child, denial of a license or something like that. So, but the big ones are land, sort of domestic ones, children, and then to a certain extent, yeah, land of course includes rent issues and so on. So as I say, these are familiar, and land, of course, we all know how many disputes in the criminal courts, so leading to violence, are actually land-based. So whatever can be done on that front is obviously very important for peace and so on. Okay. The overall picture of where people go. Divided this type of institution. Even before, well, after discussing from various organizations, including some who are represented here, the type of organizations that we would find offering services. The largest single group that people went to, 37% of people, to state institutions, and particularly to chiefs and police. And this is very much what has come up in other surveys, including the HIIL ones. And there was one, probably many people remember that about the same time, there was the Economic Survey, KNBS, had a thing on justice. And I think one of their points was the number of people who actually sought the help of gangs to resolve their disputes. We didn't have anybody who said, I got the local gang to deal with my dispute. But the state institutions, of course, included Children's Department, County Commissioner, Deputy Commissioner, county government units, and the Land Office. Then we looked at the next largest was what they would call community tradition-based, which would be elders and some of the sorts of courts, the sort of situation that people have been talking about here this morning. And then community-based organizations, not so much. Traditional, if you like. And faith-based organizations, including the Somali traditional organization or traditional approach, Maslaha, and then civil society, which could include CBOs, CSOs, and I think national organizations. Courts came very low. We did meet people who had gone to court, only 6% of the people. And community policing, including Nyumba Kumi, even less, and lawyers right down at the bottom of the pile in terms of people they consulted to deal with their disputes. We asked, how do you know about these organizations or about the whole system? And they got their knowledge initially from relatives and friends, community meetings, which sounds very useful, paralegals, sometimes through mobile clinics, and then some were common knowledge and some were the cultural norm and so on. And then there were others less important, including the police. We asked them, why did you choose the specific institutions that you went to? And one of the striking things is that the biggest single factor, in fact, in all these questions about why, was proximity. 48% of people said we went because they were close. Next, they would have said, yeah, the reputation of the organization was good. We had been referred by another organization. This is one thing that came out. The sort of cooperative relationship between different types of organization, recognizing that they can't really deal with a case, they will send it to another organization locally. Sometimes people said, we like the methods that they use, and we're happy with the sort of decisions or recommendations that they make. Cost came lower down, but of course, in fact, proximity is very important to cost. 40% of the people that we spoke to actually walked to the institution that they were dealing with, and a similar number took a boda-boda. So they were relatively close. Other factors they spoke of, surprisingly low actually, but figured that we feel the organization has a good understanding of community dynamics. And then some of them, slightly more, about 8%, said, this is the cultural norm for us. This is the organization that we tend to go to here. By and large, people were satisfied. But not everybody got their dispute dealt with at first, and they would try an alternative. Slightly more of them, when they were having to have a second effort at dealing with the issue, would go to court, but still not a very high percentage. I did wonder, I don't think it comes out clearly, whether we've got a sort of forum shopping here. You know, people didn't like what the first organization said, so they would say, let's find another one that is more amenable to us. Interesting issue, I think. Since forum shopping is something that, you know, that has sort of a, you turn your nose up at forum shopping when you're dealing with courts. One issue that inevitably came up was the gender dimension. For women, whereas 76% of men felt that the cost of dealing with their dispute was overall reasonable in the light of their own resources and so on, it was significantly, although not enormously, lower for women, 67%. But many of the respondents, we did actually ask specific questions about the position of women. About 20% of them mentioned that determination of disputes tend to favor men because of the structure and the ideologies of the systems they were dealing with. And in some of them, in the organizations also, men tend to dominate in the organizations themselves. One of the great pleasures today is to see how many women are involved in this conference. And I saw some ladies walking around with a jacket that said, AJS, operator. And I thought, that's great. But there are just one or two quotes about women. One speaking about the Injurian Cheke. The courts were biased due to false testimonies. Of course, these are people's personal recollections. But the Injurian Cheke resolved the case efficiently. People respect the oaths during the dispute process. And this was somebody against whom the complaint had been brought. He stated that he was treated with respect and empathy, although he felt that the system may not be favorable to women, because women are treated differently by the Injurian Cheke, where the oaths administered are usually rough. This reminded me, many other people may remember, during the constitution process when AJS was being discussed, and in the process that it ended up in the constitution, Bessie Murungi wrote an article in one of the sort of opinion piece in one of the newspapers saying, if my brother and I had a dispute before the Injurian Cheke, I have no confidence that he would not be treated more favorably than me. Somehow that stuck in my memory that must be about 20 years ago. And then a woman accused of witchcraft stated that she felt isolated, but better afterwards, after a resolution was found. However, she felt that she was treated differently because of her gender. The elders spoke to her harshly and refused to resolve my case because I was a woman. So, on the other hand, interestingly, one of the sort of end conclusions was a sort of index of access to justice. On the basis of how available, accessible, approachable justice was. And the women's responses, these were people who'd had experience of the system, the women's and the men's responses were not significantly different. Then, of course, we asked about costs. And a few people had had lawyers' fees, a few had had fees for P3 forms, some had had medical expenses. For most people, the biggest expense they had had in seeking a resolution of their disputes was transport, which is interesting because so many of them had actually walked, followed by airtime. And they spent a lot of time trying to sort out. And then allowances to elders. And then an average of that was about 2,500. And then meals for elders sometimes. A very few paid a bribe to somebody in the process. But apart from the courts, there was, for most people's experience, was they did not have to pay any fee for using the service. And a village elder in this county apparently said, "Kuitisha pesa kutoka kwa maskini ni kutafuta lana." I hope my pronunciation not too bad. To call for money from the poor is to seek a curse. So that was an interesting. So cost obviously looms extremely high. Then we did a sort of cost-benefit analysis. How much did it cost to get every shilling that you derived, to the extent that it was possible? There were financial things involved. I mean, for many, it wasn't financial, right? And so how much did it cost you through this process to get every shilling that you benefited from the process? Civil society organizations came out, it costs only 4 cents to get 1 shilling. Community faith-based organizations, 22 cents to get 1 shilling. State-based, 58 cents to get 1 shilling. Tradition, 66 cents to get 1 shilling. But the courts, 4 shillings and 2 cents to get 1 shilling. They were by far, of course, we had very few people who actually had gone to court, but it shows. But of course, we also have to remember there are other benefits, and other losses. One of the things that came out was the stress that people suffer from having disputes. The stress in their personal lives, the emotional stress that was sort of loomed largest, and psychological is very much the same. Lots of breakdowns in relationships as a consequence of disputes. Even sometimes physical harm from other people from having disputes. So the resolution of a dispute is not just about money. It's very much about your personal and your community and your relationship health, if you like. And people also spoke about, settling the dispute led to the restoration of relationships, to emotional satisfaction, to a restoration of their personal dignity, to a resumption of community peace, to experience in resolving similar disputes in the future, to being more knowledgeable about their rights and about how perhaps to prevent similar disputes in the future. So it's very difficult to quantify much of the benefit. We talked to the suppliers. As I said, they were very varied. How much does it cost you annually to resolve disputes? This activity, which for some organizations is not the whole of their activities by any means. This is done in terms of numbers. We had 162 suppliers in our survey. 91 of them said it cost them less than 50,000 shillings a year. That was the largest group by far. Second, however, came obviously a very different type of organisation, which cost more than $1 million a year. But the majority of them, this was not a tremendously expensive thing. But then it means a lot of people are doing a lot of work voluntarily for very little return, doesn't it? We had difficulties in collecting very clear information on this sort of issue. Some organisations were doing work for which they basically had no funding, including the police. They're not there actually to resolve civil disputes, but sometimes they respond. Pastors, they may not have anything, but it's something that they get approached for. Elders very often have no funding. Quite a lot of the institutions did not really keep very good records. We had this impression that we would be able, to sort of study their, how many cases they have and how much they cost per case and so on. But they very often had very little concrete records. Sometimes they were also reluctant to share them. And so a lot of this research was in some ways different from what we'd anticipated. We also, as I said, had a sort of access to Justice Index based on the availability. There was this 3 or 4 A's which you get in the discussions about socio-economic rights. Availability, acceptability, sometimes adaptability, acceptability. We looked at availability, accessibility, particularly in terms of distance, and acceptability on the basis of the user's responses and their satisfaction, and would they recommend it to anybody else. And generally speaking, their response was extremely positive. Community, faith-based organizations came out, well, in fact, all of them, different types, really got a very high, if you put them on a scale, pretty high on the index, in the 90s on the whole, except civil society, interestingly. Well, civil society was only in the 70s, and the courts in the 80%. And the courts got the most unfavourable as well, low. We don't really feel, it's not really accessible justice. About 13% said that. But again, as I say, not many people had much concrete, direct experience of the courts. Okay, on the basis that I add some of my own reflections on this, and then just 1 or 2 things that bug me about the whole thing. First of all, I think it's not a system. There's a quite extraordinary range of possibilities. There's obviously more in some places than others, rather different, depending on the society, the culture, the geography, and so on. And no doubt also competence and quality of the services which are offered. And where a person ends up going seems to depend on rather local factors, proximity particularly, almost random. It's not exactly random, but it's certainly the dominant being whether they're close to us or not, led considerably over, for example, what we know about their particular services. Many of the services, I suspect, are fragile and possibly ephemeral. If we went back now, maybe some of the organizations would not be there any longer, or would not be offering the same services, because many of them do not have a solid financial basis for what they're doing. Most cases are resolved by mediation and not adjudication. So hopefully we're not, in a sense, generally speaking, talking about decisions. The decisions are those of the parties to the dispute, but the contribution of the organizations being to help them reach an agreement. And as I say, some things that I've been thinking about, which many of which are voiced in the AJS policy, which I went back to in preparation for today. But one thing that does concern me is how can we make Kenyans better informed about the possibilities that are open to them? so many of them were saying we had no choice, or we didn't know, or our relatives told us. We need education of some sort so that people can make the right choices, or informed choices, shall we say. Then something that I was really what Dr. Koth said. I was going to see, there's a phrase about, when we're talking about mediation, a phrase about bargaining in the shadow of the law. In other words, you know what your legal position is, and you're sorting out your problems in that context. I'm wondering how far AJS is carried out in bargaining, in mediation, in the shadow of the Constitution. And in a sense, what's that Dr. Koth was saying? That's really important, that particularly Article 10, should be a guiding light for all of us, including AJS. It does leave me, and I would be very interested to hear what people say, what is it among the existing things that could be realistically scaled up to answer IDRC's question? And one of the things that also I think it's important to remember is how many people go to chiefs to get their questions dealt with. Very prominent in the HIAL, in our study, they very prominent. And then I realized, when I was in the constitution-making days, I was trying to understand provincial administration. And I unearthed on the internet an exam paper for provincial administration. And it became obvious to me that they were, in fact, expected to be a resource of knowledge. For example, the question was, there was a question about business enterprises, the distinctions between a partnership, a company, and a sole business, and one or two questions about matrimonial relations. And then that made me realize, yes, obviously, people they're supposed to be equipped, actually, to deal with people's questions. Something that's always bugged me. What is it about the court system, which as a lawyer, after all, one was, brought up on, and what is it about the court system that fails people? And what can the court system learn for its own proceedings? Now, Justice Ongudi suggested, incorporation of AJS into the court structures. I would wonder if there are also other things. Is there something about the way courts operate that could be changed to make it more user-friendly for people? Secondly, in the same vein, what about the legal profession? I didn't hear, was I wrong? There's nobody from the Law Society of Kenya here? There may be somebody. So, in other words, lawyers are the first place you go to if you are aware, if you've got the money and you're aware that you've got a legal dispute. What can the legal profession do to improve access to justice for Kenyans? I wonder sometimes whether there are cases in which people need an authoritative ruling which they might not get through alternative justice systems. I'm thinking particularly of land. I think there are a lot of people in this country who, I know people who say, we actually just have to give up on this piece of land because there was no way we could prove that it actually belonged to our family. You may settle agreements, but somebody dies and nobody goes through the probate process. The land doesn't get transferred to anybody formally, and yet the next generation sells it to somebody else. I actually know somebody who killed themselves, and obviously there was a mental disturbance there. But one of the precipitating factors was the difficulty of dealing with the question of acquisition of land which had actually, I think, last belonged to like the grandfather of the people who had actually transferred the land to him notionally. Then I was thinking about history. We, I think, those of us who are keen on the Constitution, would think of the Constitution as being a unifying factor in the country. And I was wondering whether also courts, in a sense, courts are a type of national system and should be, in a way, a unifying factor. One of the early English kings, Henry II, undoubtedly to boost royal privileges, improve the system of justice. But it could also be something that is good for unifying the nation. And just two other quick points. There's a lot of research on what has happened in various African countries, particularly, during the colonial period to traditional justice institutions. I know of work on Senegal, for example, and on Malawi. When they become part of the state system, first the colonial system, but then later the independent system, actually they're no longer traditional. What is the impact of an involvement of public institutions, official institutions, in alternative justice systems? And does it matter? Maybe it doesn't. If they're acceptable, more acceptable, then it may not matter that they're not as traditional as they were. And a final thought I had, the question of the variety, the different ways in which people can get their disputes. Is that a weakness, or is it in some ways a strength? And how do we, if it's a strength, how do we recognize it and support it and yet improve it if that's what needed? Thank you very much indeed.
Makofi kwa Professor Jill tena. Asante. Professor Jill Cottrell is a very, very ardent supporter of the AJS, and we are really grateful to have her on board. Now, we have come to the close of the opening session, and I want to really thank you for your kind audience. You've been very, very good participants, and we are grateful for that.
Mtazamaji, moja kwa moja basi, kama vile ambavyo umeweza kushuhudia, ni mnenaji baada ya mwingine ambao wamekuwa wakifanya tu yao ya utangulizi hili ambalo tayari limeshang'oa nanga katika mojawapo ya ukumbi katika kitivo cha maswala ama mafunzo ya sheria katika chuo hiki kikuu cha Kabarak. Na kama ndio unaungana pamoja nasi kwa mara ya kwanza kabisa, kumbuka ni kongamano kuhusiana na mbinu ama njia mbadala za kuweza kupatiana ama kuweza kupata haki kwa jamii, kwa kimombo wanasema alternative justice systems. Na kongamano hili limeng'oa nanga rasmi siku ya leo katika kaunti ya Nakuru katika chuo hiki kikuu cha Kabarak, na linatarajiwa kuweza kuendelea mpaka siku ya Ijumaa. Na wale ambao wameweza kuzungumza siku ya leo, tumekuwa na naibu gavana katika kaunti ya Nakuru ambaye ameweza kumwakilisha gavana wa Nakuru, Mheshimiwa Susan David Kones, ambaye ni naibu gavana, ameweza kufungua rasmi kongamano hili. Jaji ambaye vile vile ndio mwenyekiti wa mchakato mzima na vile vile kamati ambayo inaendesha maswala kuhusiana na njia mbadala za upatianaji wa haki, ambaye ni Jaji Profesa Joel Ngugi, ambaye vile vile ameweza kuzungumza na katika mazungumzo yake ameweza kuelezea vizuri zaidi vile ambavyo mchakato mzima wa AJS ama justice system ulivyo muhimu katika jamii. Wameweza kusisitiza vile ambavyo inakuwa ni rahisi sana na inakuwa na ufanisi mkubwa sana wakati ambapo jamii wanazungumza pamoja, wakati ambapo jamii wanapatana pamoja, wakati ambapo jamii wanasemezana, wakati ambapo labda kumekuwa na mgogoro, wakati ambapo labda kumekuwa na hatia ambayo imeweza kutokea, ama kuna kosa ambayo imeweza kufanywa, wameweza kuainisha vizuri na kuweza kuelezea vizuri vile ambavyo utumiaji wa mchakato huu ulivyo na manufaa mengi, ulivyo na faida ya kemkem, wakati ambapo tunalinganisha na wakati ambapo kesi inapelekwa mahakamani. Na kumekuwa na wananaji wengine ambao vile vile katika kaunti ya Nakuru katika mahakama Gogudi, ambaye vile vile ameweza kuelezea vile ambavyo mtindo huu na vile ambavyo mchakato huu unavyowasaidia wakazi, na vile vile hata akatoa wito ya kwamba ni vizuri kwa umma, ni vizuri kwa wananchi kuweza kuhakikisha kwamba wakati ambapo majaji mbalimbali wanaangazia kesi kesi tofauti wahakikisha kwamba wameweza kutumia mchakato huu. Na mtazamaji, ni baadhi tu ya masuala ambayo yameweza kujitokeza, ishara tosha kwamba katika siku 4 zijazo bila shaka kutakuwa na utajiri mkubwa sana shauri mawaidha ya mtindo huu letea mengi, lakini shukrani sana MBCI chuo kikuu Kabarak kwa niaba ya kikosi kizima ambacho kinahakikisha upeperushaji huu umefaulu. Jina langu ni Mangicho.